I think everybody wants to know, how did you escape? Because I know there was some crazy story where you were being shot at as you crossed the border. I mean, that's wild.
So my parents finally made the decision to leave. It was during the Iran-Iraq War. There was bombs flying everywhere. There was, more clamping down of this Islamist ideology. We didn't have freedom of thought, freedom to practice our religion, freedom of speech. Here it's cancel culture, right? You get canceled online, but over there you got canceled by like disappearing and never coming back again.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Starstruck with Sarah Pachter, brought to you by Aish. Here on this podcast, I interview celebrities, digital influencers, and philanthropists, as well as those who have stories of resilience. I try to draw out the deeper meaning behind their everyday choices and share that with you in a relatable way. For more episodes and other content, subscribe to Aish.com's podcast channel. Today, we are so honored to have Dr. Sheila Nazarian joining us on the show. Dr. Nazarian is an award-winning plastic surgeon based in Beverly Hills and also has an Emmy-nominated Netflix show. As a child, Dr. Nazarian narrowly escaped Iran after the revolution and has a harrowing story of survival. I can't wait for you to hear more about this fascinating story and more of her wisdom. Dr. Nazarian, welcome. We are so honored to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Wow, Sarah, that was like a robotically accurate intro. I'm super impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. We're so excited to have you. First of all, this is a manifestation right now. Us sitting on these couches is something that we talked about months ago. Do you remember?
I do remember.
Okay, so I remember you had asked me to speak for your Think Big online conference, which I was so grateful to be a part of. Thank you. And, afterwards we were kind of brainstorming, how are we going to film? And you said to me, why don't you come over, sit on the couches in my living room? We'll have a talk about the balance between work and home life. And here we are months later. This wasn't even a dream at that point. And here we are, this time sitting on my couches. And we are definitely going to talk about work-home balance. So we're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I also meant to thank you. The other week, you came to a lecture of mine on family purity. I know the crowd was thrilled to have you in the audience, and I was so honored to have you there. But, it got me thinking, because here in America, in 2023, we can go to any lecture on Judaism that we want to. We can keep any commandment or any tradition of Judaism that we want to. We get to serve God how we want to serve God. And that's not really what it was like in Iran growing up, was it?
No, I mean, we had to be a lot more secretive. I mean, growing up for my parents, during the reign of the Shah, it was very open. He was very supportive, and everything was very open. Women were able to wear mini skirts. It was high fashion. The Persian women, as you know, are very much into fashion and beauty and all of those things. And so it was, very open. Then when the Islamic Revolution happened, in general, I think the population had to censor their speech, be careful who they say what to. You never knew if your neighbor was, working for the Revolutionary Guard, like under cover. And so, no, it was, freedom of thought was almost not allowed. And so, especially for women, as I think the world is seeing now on full display, the opportunities were just not there anymore. It was a lot more restrictive. Literally, if you step out of the house, you're no longer dressing for yourself, you're dressing for the government. Wow. They use women as full display of the government's power. When you step out all covered up and beaten for showing a strand of hair, you're no longer dressing for yourself or living for yourself. You're living for someone else. And so my parents, in their great wisdom, with 2 daughters, knew that there was no future for their daughters in Iran and made a plan to get out.
Wow. And what I'm curious about is, how fast did that transformation take place? Because it sounds like things were so normal and then suddenly completely not normal.
You're right. And honestly, in America, I'm smelling the same smells, which is why I'm so active on social media and outspoken, to my detriment. I think actually to detriment and to gain. But I just feel like when I see the same conversations that were happening in Iran. Like, for example, why does the Shah get to live in a castle when there's homeless people on the street? These socialist, slightly communist, ideologies, which really haven't worked anywhere in the world, happened in Iran, rather quickly. It was less than 10 years, it was less than 5 years. So you see the changes in how rapidly things can shift when people who know better are silent. And so that's why we can't stay silent. We have to speak up, whether it's to fight anti-Semitism or to fight governmental and thought policies that we as first-generation immigrants have witnessed and have suffered from.
Right. Well, I have to tell you what I love about you, and this is just, I just love this about you, that you're not afraid. You do not have fear. If there is something that you think is not right, you're going to speak out. And even if that means losing followers. And what I want to know is, how do you get to that point where you don't care? And you're just like, I am going to do the right thing, or what I believe is the right thing.
Well, I mean, I do care, but I care about other things more.
Yeah.
I think that, and also, it was definitely an evolution. Like, I did not come out of the womb without fear or this outspoken or courageous. I think that it's almost in honor of sort of what my parents sacrificed that I choose to speak up now, because they left everything. And it wasn't like they made the decision so lightly. Oh, let's leave Iran. Let's leave our home and my dad's job and a comfortable life. This was not an easy decision to make. Let's go to a country where we have nothing, no connections, no one, barely speak the language, to give our kids an opportunity. So in honor of that sacrifice, how can I shut up?
Right. Right. That's beautiful. I mean, I think what we all kind of want to know, and we're obviously going to get to the transition of how your parents transitioned into Beverly Hills from Persia, from Iran. But, more importantly, I think everybody wants to know, how did you escape? Because I know there was some crazy story where you were being shot at as you crossed the border. I mean, that's wild.
So my parents finally made the decision to leave. It was during the Iran-Iraq war. There was bombs flying everywhere. There was, more clamping down of this Islamist ideology. We didn't have freedom of thought, freedom to practice our religion, freedom of speech. Here it's cancel culture, right? You get canceled online, but over there you got canceled by disappearing and never coming back again. So, wow. I mean, so it was. They just made the decision. We got in touch with smugglers. We were able to get some money into our family in America to save for us so that we wouldn't come here completely destitute. And one day, my dad said he was going to a medical conference in America, and he left my mom, my sister, and my passport with the government to be like, listen, I'm just going to this medical conference. We're not leaving. Here, this is the passports of my wife and kids. And he went to Vienna, waited there for us, and what became the translator and the unofficial physician of HIAS, the organization that's still in the works today. And he would basically take care of asylum seekers when they were sick or help translate while he went to the embassy to try to get visas for us. While he was in Vienna, and we didn't see him for 3 months, we went to the bazaar one day in Iran, and we got into the back of a truck, covered truck, I remember, and we were kind of fetal positioned on the bottom of this truck into each other with strangers that we didn't know. They put burlap sacks on top of us and then corn. And so that's how we got kind of towards the Pakistani border. Once we got close enough to the border, I remember we made a bathroom stop, which was basically a clay shack with a hole in the ground. And I remember in that bathroom was where my mom told me we were going to America, and I thought I was going to meet Michael Jackson, and that was because we had bootleg Thriller videos and all the stuff, we knew the dances. And so then we spent one night in the desert, and I have this vivid memory of just sitting in the back of the pickup truck, and they were chasing a rabbit around in the desert. Wow. And then the next day we got, back on we're sitting on our luggage in the back of the pickup truck, and the lights were off. It was nighttime still. It was still, the sun hadn't come up, and we were driving, and the border guards saw us. They turned on the headlights, started speeding, and they were following us and shooting at us. And we went over a ravine where it was like 2 wheels were on one side, 2 wheels were on the other. And then the border police just thought that was too risky for them to keep following. And so that's how we got away. We went into Pakistan, and we stayed in Pakistan for 3 months, waiting for those visas, and finally reunited with my father in Vienna.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So you literally jumped over a ravine, and that is what saved your life, because they did not feel that it was worth the risk or whatever. Wild. And how old were you at this time?
By then I was almost 7. And my
Wow.
sister was 13.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And do you and your sister have like varying memories because she was a little bit older?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on writing a book right now. And so it's been very interesting because I'm having like somebody help me write it. And so when she's asking me questions, I'm like, oh my God, I've never thought about that question. Let me go ask my dad. Or, my mom's passed away since, but I'm like having her also interview my sister, because as a 13-year-old, there's so many memories. I was at a Nowruz, Persian New Year function a couple weeks ago, and this guy came up to me and he's like, are you Sheila? And I was like, yes. And he goes, was your mom this person? Was your sister this person? He's like, I escaped with you. Wow. And he was telling me that he was actually in a Pakistani prison for 28 days when we first got to Pakistan. He's like, do you remember this hotel? And then us moving to this hotel. And I have no memories of that. So just, getting the input of my sister, and I'm going to reach out to this guy to also get his memory, because he was a bit older. He was 20. Wow. But it's crazy kind of what I remember and what my mom phrased things as. Like when we were about to escape through the desert, she's like, we're going on a roller coaster through the desert. Or when there was bombs flying in to Iran, she's like, look at the fireworks. Because, the sirens would go off and we'd run to the window and watch these bombs coming through the air. So I think I have a very different framing and lens through which I experienced what happened versus my sister versus someone that was a little bit older.
Yeah, she was trying to protect you. My gosh. Well, I remember you mentioning that your father was really instrumental in not only the escape, because he was such a prominent doctor, but also the transition here into America. I'd love to hear a little bit about that transition. I know it must have been crazy for you to be, I grew up watching 90210. I cannot imagine what it was like for a girl from Iran, an immigrant, having to make it, so to speak, in Beverly Hills High. Talk to us about that.
Okay, so when we arrived, we were actually living in a 2-bedroom apartment with my aunt and her family. So she had 2 kids, and obviously we had 2 kids, so it was really 8 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment. My dad would take his bicycle to Beverly Hills Library every day to study, to take his board exam so he can practice as a physician in America. And eventually we were able to, get our own place and things like that. But when I came, I was in the 1st grade. And what's really interesting is there was a boy that was in my 1st grade class at Beverly Vista, and he became my translator, but he was in my preschool in Iran. Like, I have a picture of us in Iran at the same preschool. So it was a very difficult transition in the sense that I did not fit in. I was extremely thin as a child. Like, I remember my elbows and my knees were like the fattest part of my body, like the widest part of my extremities, and my parents didn't let us shave our legs because they're like, who are you shaving your legs for? Like, it meant like you're going to be promiscuous or like something, you're trying to impress a boy. But I did study very hard. I was smart. I was smarter than the average student. I didn't realize this stuff back then. I just felt like, oh my God, they're going to figure me out. Or like when I got accepted to Harvard Westlake, for example, which is a big, difficult school to get into in Los Angeles, I was like, oh my God, they're going to say it's a mistake when I get there. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like as girls, we go through this like level of imposter syndrome. Yeah. But looking back, I worked very hard. I was smart. And I think it's just a combination. Getting here today, I remember like watching that Netflix series on the college scandal, and I just turned to my husband, who's a brain surgeon, and I was like, it's amazing how far we made it with 0 connections, But it just goes to show that's the power of America. That's the American dream, is that it doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim. You have talent, intelligence, grit, and perseverance. You will make it. Right. And so I'm just so grateful to my parents and so grateful to this country.
Well, I have to say, I do want to get to that Netflix show, but first you have to tell everyone the Nair story. I dream about one day you are going to get a package of a lifetime supply of Nair products.
I don't even want Nair.
I'm not even going to sign my name. You're going to be like, oh, that was Sarah Pachter's gift. Okay,
no,
fine.
I remember when my parents wouldn't let me shave my legs. You know, we would go to it used to be Thrifties. Now it's Rite Aid on Cannon. And bought Nair and like was applying all these chemicals to myself, which I'm sure is like not great for you. But you know, we kind of snuck the getting rid of the hair situation.
Well, speaking of destroying your skin, let's talk about now your Netflix show, which is the polar opposite. It's called Skin Decision, right? Tell us about this show. I did see a trailer and I was like, that's the best trailer I've ever seen in my life. You were so natural. It was so great. Tell us about the show.
I always knew I wanted a show. I remember I was a 5th-year plastic surgery resident at USC, and they said, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I'm like, I'm going to have my own show. And they're like, okay, weirdo, you go do that. But, you know, I was a dancer for 12 years. I did all of the singing and theater and stuff growing up. And something about influencing the masses was always very satisfying to me. I mean, I think it's great as a physician influencing each person's lives one-on-one. Yeah. But if you can take that and amplify it, I think that's so fun. And so I pitched 3 shows before this one. One of them was I was under contract with E for a year, and that one ended up not getting picked up, and I was devastated. But the producer from that show came and got me when this opportunity came up, and so we filmed it. I remember we were on our way to England just for like a family vacation, and in the airport I got the news that it got picked up, and my husband was like, oh, congratulations, like not knowing what we were getting ourselves into. But we started filming, and then from that call to fruition was 2 years.
Wow.
So we filmed for about 4 months, and I felt like a resident all over again.
I'm sure.
Because I had my job, I had my family, and then it was 3 days a week of filming, waking up at 5 a.m. for hair and makeup, getting home at like 8 p.m. But it was totally worth it. It was so much fun. I adored it. And it did really well. We got nominated for People's Choice Award. We got nominated for an Emmy. I didn't get to do the red carpet because it was like COVID. So I was sitting at my kitchen table for the Emmy nomination, which sucked, but okay. But no, it was received really well. And I think it was the first plastic surgery show that didn't make a mockery of the person getting the plastic surgery. It was very educational, very documentary, very emotional, and it really shed a new light on plastic surgery. And I was always very like in the open on social media, on my Instagram, and a lot of my colleagues didn't like that. But when the show came out, I think it elevated the industry. And so a lot of people who before might have been like, who does she think she is? Was like, oh, Team Sheila, you know?
Right. They're joining your bandwagon. I love that. Well, the show seems really, really interesting. And what I loved what you said was how the first show that you wanted to do did not get picked up. And the fact that you're willing to kind of talk about the failure or the setback. I find that oftentimes when I experience failure and setback, it's almost like God is making room for something even greater, and we see that with you and all that you went through. So
no, I honestly, like, some of the things that happened in my life, like, I feel like God is like a wind in my back, you know? It's like, how does everything work out? How does everything whatever? And I had a patient who was getting I think a facelift with me or something, and she's like, you know, for the last 2 weeks I've been praying for you, and every time I do that, God comes to me. He's like, I know her, I'm aware of her. So,
oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Just like, I feel that though, like, right. It's really like in my everyday, I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful. I'm so just like grounded knowing of my faith and my core values, and really just feeling like I know who I am, and that the decisions I make, if it comes from a place of love and my core values, I will never get canceled. I will never be, you know, misinterpreted by people who are kind of witness to that.
That's so encouraging to hear you say that, because it gives hope to a lot of people who are worried about that concept. But I totally forgot what I was about to say. How about that? What were we talking about? Oh yeah, let's talk about, on that note of your faith in God, how does God animate your everyday life? How does Judaism, how do you, incorporate Judaism into your overall big scheme and then your nitty gritty day to day?
I think the major way that I incorporate Judaism, I'm not, following every single rule. I wish I could.
Nobody is. Nobody is. Everyone's doing their best.
Yeah, I just think it's almost like an instruction pamphlet. And so why should I reinvent the wheel when all of this stuff has been figured out? I'll give you some examples. Yeah. So many people are like, oh, I have a membership at Unplugged. So let me go pay this place to take the phone away from me so that I can unplug, where like that's Shabbat. Like that was figured out, right? Or, let me meditate in the morning. Okay, well, like those are prayers that you're supposed to do throughout the day to bring structure to chaos. Yeah. And so I just think people, for some reason, have a problem saying God, and have a problem with the idea of God these days. And studies have shown that they're no happier, but they're trying to fill that void with these other words like meditate and unplug and so on and so forth, where it's all been done before. Like, why are you trying to reinvent the wheel when it's all here?
I love that answer. It's so true. And it's so beautiful. And I love Shabbat and Shabbat is our, Saturday. It's the day of rest for the Jewish people. I love it partly because I wake up and I'm like, oh, I don't have to turn my phone on. I'm not a slave to my phone today. So yes, that unplugged concept is so strong and so important. So tell us, I guess, now that we're here and we're sitting on my couches, let's talk about that work-home balance. You have 3 kids. You have such a high-level job that requires so much from you. How do you do it all?
Well, I think that in my training program, there was absolutely no balance. I think it's taken a while to get to here. Yeah. And I used to hear that phrase, you can have it all, but not at the same time. It's totally not true. You can have it all at the same time, but it just takes a minute to get there. So in my training, for example, I was working 80 hours a week, every third night sleeping in the hospital, pregnant 3 times, breastfeeding in like a closet at the LA County Hospital. And that was no balance. Right. And now that I have my own practice and other physicians that work there, I can set my own schedule. Like, for example, I take every Thursday off to do things like this, which also feed my soul and keep me from burning out. My daughter's spring sing at her school is after this. I get to attend. Right. And, today's doctor's day. So there's a party from our hospital. My husband and I are at St. John's Hospital, and so they're having a thing to us, and we get to go. So it's all about planning the trips, planning the events, and making sure that you are a happy person and a fulfilled person, which doesn't come from just doing one thing all day. And I think this is a very new concept for surgeons, especially because when they train you, they're like, okay, we gave you the opportunity. Now go die with a scalpel in your hand. And that's why there's so much burnout, because I think they teach you this. And then you get out and you go into practice and you're like, wait, that's it? What now? Am I evil for not feeling fulfilled just doing this all day long? And so for me, for a while, doing fashion stuff and doing the TV show and 50 other things, people looked at me like professionally and were like, how dare she? And now at all of our conferences, there's like talks on burnout and how you should do other things and like, to make you a happier person, which in turn makes you a happier doctor and a better doctor, compassionate, empathy. When you're burnt out, it's very hard to have empathy. So I just kind of figured that out. And now I'm glad to see people kind of shifting in the same direction.
Yeah, you were trend setting for sure, because now everybody's on board. That's great. I mean, I know as a mom, I definitely feel and empathize with what you're saying. If you're burned out, it's very hard to be able to get on the floor, look at your child in the eye, and like really give them love, because if you're burned out, there's nothing inside for you to give. So to recap what you were saying, you're basically saying set the boundaries, create variety in your life so that you're not just doing one thing all day long. And as a mom or as any professional, I think people can relate to that because you can't have a singular focused anything. Your life and Judaism is about having variety, broadness, etc. So I love that answer.
And I think like this whole boss babe movement and even the word feminism is so different now than when we were fighting for it when I was younger. It's almost like looked down upon to have kids. It's like looked down upon to be a wife. It's like people are like, I never want to get married. I never want to have kids. Is it easier? No. Quote unquote. I mean, it probably is easier. Being a mom is very difficult. Having a good marriage is a lot of work. Right. But is it as fulfilling, and will you ultimately be as happy? No.
Right.
And so I just feel like it needs to kind of swing back. And for all the young people watching, there is nothing more fulfilling than family. Your job will not hug you when you come home. So this is coming from a very overachieving professional woman. I'm so glad I went to Albert Einstein for medical school because, you know, the people that I was going with were the Orthodox Jews and some Mormons sprinkled in, and they all had 4 kids by the time they were in medical school. So every day when I got up to walk to my classes, there was like 900 kids chalk drawing on the floor on my way there. And so I was just like, I'm behind. Like, I need to get married. In my 4th year of medical school, I literally put it on my to-do list, like put a little square box and then like get married. So it is, that's the work. Like if you are smart and you are hardworking, you will make it in your career. Do not worry about that. That's the easy part. Right. Make sure your professional life is on track with your career at the same time. And to me, I think that then you don't feel like you sacrificed a big part of yourself for your job.
Yes, and I think that happens a lot to women. You know, you mentioned talking about happiness and feeling fulfilled. What are some of the things that you do to keep yourself happy?
Traveling, I think, is amazing. I love clothes.
Me too.
That's a lot of fun. My kids are so fun. Like, I love hanging out with them. I love taking them to basketball. I just love seeing them grow. I feel like it's really interesting in the sense that my parents, you know, really couldn't guide me. They could guide me in like general, but they didn't know like dating, you know, like those types of things. So now with my, you know, kids, I feel like it's me. It's like it's my chance to impart wisdom on them, which is so fun.
It is. But I wonder if our boys play basketball together. You sent to Milken, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
My kids are Brentwood.
Oh, my bad. No, they don't.
One of their 3 different schools right now, but next year they'll all be at Brentwood.
Okay.
So
very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think what I really want to get to is this talk about how you fight anti-Semitism. I think it's a huge thing that you're doing. I want to know how you go about it and then what advice you have for other people in terms of speaking out.
I was really scared. I mean, I'm first generation, right? We didn't even hang mezuzahs on our doors. We wouldn't put the menorah in the window. I wouldn't even we even changed our last name so it wouldn't sound Jewish, right?
What was the last name?
It was like, I know 6 generations back, it was Orange, and it was Iraqi, apparently.
Okay.
But I just did my genetic testing, and I'm 70% Italian by DNA, apparently, and some Greek and some Indian, and like only 10% Jewish.
Well, that's funny.
I know. I'm like being Queen Esther over here, at 10% Jewish, but it's okay. So I actually started when my daughter was applying to high schools, and she was applying to my high school as like one of the places. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's 4 years away from college. Like, I have to start normalizing Judaism. I don't want her to get to campus and not be able to say she's Jewish. So with great trepidation, I did a post on Friday and I did hashtag Shabbat Shalom, and literally very, very little tiny, you know, heartbeat palpitation situation. And nothing really happened. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll keep going a little bit more. And then when the conflict happened, I was seeing my colleagues, you know, like physicians, actual physicians, 100,000 followers, 150,000 followers, writing about genocide and occupation and apartheid and all of those buzzwords they love to use. And that's when I went into literally survival mode, and I was posting 8.5 hours a day. Wow. I was waking up with anxiety. I've never had anxiety in my life. Like I lost my mom at the age of 16. I escaped Iran, and those things weren't anxiety provoking as much as this was. Oh, wow. Just because I feel like that fear is so ingrained, especially in, Persian Jews that are here. I know Russian Jews went through, similar, if not worse things, South American Jews. But I couldn't stop. Like I almost felt like not only could I not sleep at night if I didn't speak up, I physically could not stop. Wow. And I think I changed a lot of minds. I think I brought a lot of knowledge. I brought a lot of hope to kids in Israel who were messaging me, DMing me in bomb shelters saying, "You're the only light I see." Because you saw what happened in Hollywood and on social media. It was terrible. And I don't know what it was. My Instagram, I think I had like 500 or 600,000 followers at that time, all over the world because of the Netflix show. It went from like plastic surgery to fashion to Israel and fighting anti-Semitism and speaking the truth. And by the way, you guys, like I hate it when people say your truth. There is no your truth. There's the truth, and then there's your feelings about it. So if anyone says, "Oh, your truth," no. There's one truth, and we have to speak the truth. Yes. And you can't be afraid to do that. Otherwise, you are almost like perpetuating what happened similarly in Iran. Mm-hmm. Good people were silent. They said it's never going to happen here. And look at where the people of Iran are now.
Right. I think something that I really want to know about, you have so much positive energy, so many messages to share, but I really want to know is what is the essential core message that you're trying to share with the world?
I think what is really important, especially when I speak to young people or when I speak to, just anyone, is don't be scared. Speak up. Whatever your comfort level is or your reach or your platform is, make yourself slightly uncomfortable. And that might be #Shabbat Shalom, as it was for me. And stay in that space for a little while until you're comfortable in that space, and then get yourself uncomfortable a little bit more again. But the days of being silent and scared and putting our head in the sand are over. The times when the Jews especially do well is when we're united and when we're not afraid and we're strong. And so I see a lot of divisiveness happening. I see some exclusion happening within our own. That has to stop. We have to open up conversations with each other again, whether it's political differences or religious observance differences. We need to come together. We need to bring in allies, and we need to speak up with strength and with conviction and with love.
Yeah, that is such a good answer. And it's actually, believe it or not, what the Torah, our primary text, the primary Jewish text, talks about unity and how important that is. And when we are united, nothing can stop us. So it's such a good answer what you're sharing. We have a couple minutes. I figured I'd kind of backtrack a little bit. Did you always know that you wanted to be a doctor?
No, I was actually really much into building things. And so I thought maybe I would be an architect or something like that, or maybe an orthopedic surgeon. My dad was a physician. In our garage, we had like worms in formaldehyde in glass bottles on the shelves. We didn't have like bikes. We didn't have stuff to fix cars with. It was just like jars and jars of things my dad had removed from people. So it was always like, I think medicine was always like an influence. And as most immigrant parents teach their kids, there's only like 5 jobs, right? You could be a doctor, a lawyer, a pharmacist, an engineer, or an accountant, or a dentist. Like that was it. And I'm always fascinated, funny enough, with my patients. When they tell me what they do, I'm like, wait, I didn't even know like that was a job. What do you do? Like, how did you even do that?
Give us an example.
Like anybody in the industry, right? Where they're like, I design the sets in this genre for this type of show. Right. I'm like, what are you saying? Or like costume designers or anything, honestly, anything creative was never an option. Like if my dad wanted to be a musician and his parents were like, okay, but a doctor and you can do music on the side. And sure enough, now with his like 80-year-old doctor friends, they have a little band and they get together once a month and they play music, and he's a very talented musician. Yes. But, you know, you had to support your family and you had to have a stable job, basically. So I looked into architecture, and I didn't want to be sitting behind a desk. I didn't want to just design it. I wanted to use my hands and build it. So I looked at orthopedic surgery, went and shadowed a surgeon for a while, wasn't as creative as I would like. So somebody was like, why don't you look into plastic surgery? And honestly, it's such a good fit to me, to the point that if I didn't get accepted into a plastic surgery program, because it's very competitive, I would have probably done something else. I would have finished medical school, then done business school, which I ended up doing later in life anyway, and then gone into like the business of medicine or something. Right. The only thing that I wanted to do as a doctor was be a plastic surgeon.
Wow, that's incredible. I do kind of want to know, I remember you talked about your dad and how he discovered something.
Yes.
So he's in medical textbooks or something like
yes.
that. That was so fascinating.
So
to
my
me.
dad, when he was a medical student, he's a pathologist. So when he was doing autopsies, there was a bunch of children in an orphanage in Iran that were dying. And so he did their autopsies, and in their lungs found something he'd never seen before. So there was a lecturer from the University of Pennsylvania that had come and given a talk. So he sent the slides to him, and it was something that is actually associated with AIDS patients and malnutrition children. So all of our textbooks, when they're speaking about this particular disease, say it happens in AIDS patients and malnutrition children. And literally those three words, it's interesting when you're like, those three words came from so much research. So it's like, when you open up a medical textbook, how many years of someone's life went into every three words?
Yeah.
You know,
it's funny that you talk about opening up a text and how so much is behind every three words. I hate to kind of bring it back to Judaism, but I'm going to do it anyways. It's kind of like, you open up a Torah, our primary text, and one word has so much meaning. It took so much time, and it's just worlds and layers of meaning.
And there's so many interpretations of those three words. And, I love that. That's why I love, I was a Bronfman fellow when I was 16 in Israel. That was the first time that I was really among thought leaders. And we would, read the interpretations together. I never had any formal Jewish training. I didn't go to Hebrew school. And so that was really the first time that I was like, whoa, there's so much. So when I got to Columbia University, I was actually originally a religion major. I showed up to the class, and the first thing the professor said was, I don't give out A's. And I'm like, well, mama has to get into medical school. So then I switched to philosophy. They said they don't give out A's. And I was like, okay, what class, what are the jocks majoring in? Yes. Economics? Okay, I will major in economics. And that was fascinating too, because it's almost like the psychology of money and how people spend their money and how, people view the world really with how they spend. And so when I was taking 2 years for research between general surgery training and plastic surgery training, I actually went to the Marshall School of Business as well, because I just, that love and fascination with economics sort of continued. And I just think, again, like, you can be a plastic surgeon, you can go to business school, you can be in fashion, you can have a family.
Says
like,
the overachiever
right
but
here.
Says the overachiever.
Was it easy? No.
Right.
I remember there were some days I was driving home from residency and I would somehow make it home, and I would call my husband to come pick me up out of the car because I legit could not stand. I mean, it was very difficult, but you can do it.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I learned so much from you. I'm so inspired by you. I know everybody is going to be so inspired when they hear this. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sitting on these couches with me. And thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
If you want to learn more about Dr. Sheila Nazarian, check out the article I wrote about her on Aish.com, linked in the episode description. You can find this podcast on your favorite podcasting platform and on Aish.com's YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Aish.com for more content. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.